call this meeting to order at 3:03 p.m. Do you want to take the attendance?
Sure. Sam Samara,
Here.
Hal Christensen,
Here.
Marsha Cox,
Here.
Mr. Otasi,
Dr. Otasi.
Carrie Thompson, Kat Rooney.
Okay. Stand for Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Do we have any call to the public?
No.
So the next is discussion and possible action on benefits and rates.
Okay, Madam Chair, so you have a memo in your packet. After the last meeting, there's some requests from the trustees to place out some additional changes that these are in addition to those that have previously been adopted. If you'd like to just walk through them. The very first one is to require that the wellness clinic, the Cerner Clinic folks, use the Blue Cross contract for LabCorp. So this is a change where basically they would write the script for the lab, the employee would take it and go to LabCorp and have it done. So what it does is it simply, instead of using their contract, the Cerner contract is 35% off billed. We would access the Blue Cross. Now, coincidentally, and Leonard and I just finished this up, ECA sent a LabCorp bill from Cerner to Gilswar.
Okay.
And asked them to run it through the Blue Cross pricing system for the light codes. And they came back, we're still looking through it to confirm it, right? But in essence, it came back and said that if the labs went through the Blue Cross contract instead of that 35% discount, it'd be about a 30.5% reduction in costs. Okay, so if you take that and annualize it, and I had Elena run this, and again, please treat these numbers as preliminary for the prior 12, the average of the last couple of years, okay? We're averaging basically 125,000, 124,692. So if you said 30% off of that, we got about a little over a $40,000 savings just by making that move. All things being equal.
So that's moving it from the clinic to the LabCorp outside.
Yep. So there's still LabCorp, but
Right.
the difference was that they have a flat 35% off, but it's, in essence, the Blue Cross discount is equal. So from an employee's perspective, the only difference would be instead of having everything come through the lab, it goes to LabCorp outside, and it runs through Blue Cross.
Would they still draw the labs at the center? Or would
That's
they...
my understanding, and
Okay.
Lena jumped in, but they would still draw at the clinic, and then it would be done through LabCorp personnel instead of Cerner personnel.
Okay.
So then that revolves. So the employees, essentially, the employees don't see any change, but it's in my view, it's a fairly substantial reduction in terms of the cost that we get from the district. And all we're doing with these changes is we're closing the gap on the funding, how much of a drawdown we're going to do on the surplus incrementally. So we would obviously recommend that one. Second, on the adding a $10 RX copay for all the medications, so anything dispensed through the clinic. This one's kind of an interesting one because this is basically would continue to have the clinic provide the drugs, but just add a copay to it, make it equivalent to what's going on effective in July outside. You can see the changes here. This does not do any kind of assessment of the pricing of the drugs through the clinic. Now, we have attempted to do some of that so far. We've not been successful. The reasoning is that intermixed with the drugs that the clinic is dispensing is a lot of OTC product, including things that are totally absolutely without script.
Right.
Okay, so that's been a little tough for us to do. So this just basically says if you get something there, the employee would have a $10 copay on this. There's an ongoing conversation. This one's pretty simple to do, but there's also an ongoing conversation with the clinic where, and we just got some more responses on it today, where they had suggested putting all scripts outside, right? And they're all generic, essentially they're all generic, right? But moving all scripts outside with the exception of some things for episodic care. Now, they said episodic, and what the original intent when it came through from Sharon was antibiotics. They would dispense have the antibiotics for everything else out, but they came back today and asked for further clarification of that term. So it was a term they had proposed. They're now coming back saying, well, do you want us to also keep like on hand some 30-day for high blood pressure meds or anything if anybody ran out of those. What I would suggest to you is we don't know the answer to that. It came in at the last minute. I think the $10 copay, if you're interested in it, is realistic because it aligns it with, for the time being, I think this is a good step.
Can I just ask also on that, are they still going to require that their only manner of payment is going to be a check? Because I don't believe they're equipped to handle a credit card.
They can take a credit card.
They can take a credit card.
I think, was the original conversation only check? Because I thought that's what they mentioned, that was only cash or check.
The correspondence I've seen, they are able to take any kind of debit card,
Okay.
whether it's HSA, FSA, well, not an HSA in this case, but an FSA card, debit card, credit card.
Okay,
I don't think they
Again,
can
that's for
handle
mine too, like I haven't seen anything that's talking about check or cash.
okay, good.
The last one is to eliminate any OTC meds and product on there, and we would again suggest this the same way. You know why? We would, from our side, this one makes all three of these make good sense to do. The next ones, on the following page are. This one the top one that has some small changes came from Wisconsin RX, was one of their suggestions afterwards. Fairly small savings, but a really good idea. Basically what they're saying is for some of these high-cost specialty meds, particularly related to some of the cancer treatments, that initial dispense would be limited to 2 weeks.
Right.
And the rationale is there's frequently adjustments in there where they wind up essentially tossing some portion of the med.
Yeah.
So they would just do every 2 weeks. We think that's a really good one. And they suggested also as a kind of a care management issue, so we think that one makes sense. And the last one is actually a slight increase in costs, and this one is moving to 3D mammographies in MOM. We would also recommend that one. We actually, Jamie and I met with the hospital. This was one of the questions they were talking about, was you guys have 3D technology. So it's basically more detail in there. We're comfortable with adding it.
But so this says you're recommending against it. Are you saying?
Correct. It's more expensive, so purely on a cost basis.
Right.
The question is, do you guys want to add it in?
And we don't have any information as far as 3D, 2D, as far as, being able to find something quicker, or, obviously.
What they say is it's much more exact. And I'll tell you what I think is actually going to happen. I think you're seeing, this is where it's all going to go. They're all going to replace the 2D and go 3D. So with the assumption that the greater detail of the number of slices that they can do on the tissue is ultimately going to be better off. I can tell you, having met with the hospital here in Kingman, that they're all touting 3D. My only concern on it beyond the cost, recognizing that I'm somebody who's not going to have, odds are I'm never going to have breast cancer, so there's always that issue of, are you giving me the best? That kind of thing. I think that from a comfort level, most of our clients have in fact added 3D technology when it's available. And again, I think 3 years from now, once they phase out the 2D units, this is all you're going to see. So we're comfortable with it either way. I think there is some pricing differential to it. There is a cost. So you just got to recognize that.
My question, the EE and EO, are those mean the same thing?
Yeah,
On the
emergency
first page it
department or
says EE.
emergency room.
What's that?
It's either emergency department or emergency.
No, I'm saying on the
Oh, employee and employee only?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
sure.
EO?
EE,
Yeah, I think that's.
EE, those are the same thing, right?
EO is employee only, employee spouse, employee one
But
child.
on the front page it says EE. That's how the-
It's the same.
It's a type.
Oh, I
That's
apologize. Yep,
That's the same thing, right?
Correct.
That's- Okay.
yep, sorry. So, Madam Chair, it's pretty much up to you guys how you want to proceed.
Well, and just to clarify on number 2, it says copay for all medications, but it's specifically all generic medications because they're not dispensing any brand name.
Our understanding is that they are only dispensing generics.
Okay. And then OTC is all OTC products like the Mucinex and all that we.
Correct.
Okay.
And it again includes, was there anything else?
I think there was a Pantoprazole, and I saw a couple on there, but they're.
Yeah, like I know Meprazole, I know, which is OTC. I think anything else you remember from the conversation?
I remember panty liners.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, which obviously don't require a script,
Right.
so
Have they ever dispensing that?
we just did.
Yeah, there were, I know the bill that I looked at, which was, I think we got it in December, but it was for October. That was the one where we were being charged $800 for a vitamin D lab, which is obscene. And I think I still really want to have that one disputed or audited, because the bills before that and after that were not that, obviously that high. But that one was just, crazy high. But it had things like these things you buy in the grocery store, over-the-counter kind of stuff.
Right.
It was just, I've never seen those allowed. But
I'll just tell you an argument. Do you remember, Janie, did Janie have a specific recommendation on the 3D?
Her specific recommendation was against implementing it, just because of the high increase that the trust is experiencing and the cost impact it is on. So strictly cost.
So if someone gets a 2D memo and it all looks good, there'd be no reason to go any further. But if they found something, then they could go to get a 3D. Is that?
Well, it switches, and again, with the caveat not being a doc, what we've seen happen, right, is they go, these are not diagnostic, these are screening.
these are all
So
routine screenings.
these
Right.
are, is there
They couldn't
anything
have
in
had
here?
any other problem.
Right. Well, that's so if you get a 2D and the majority come out hopefully clean, then the 3D wouldn't be anything we need to consider at that point, or
Well, the typical trajectory would be, at that point, they switch from the preventative, they put to some other provider, typically a hospital-based provider, and they do further testing that can include another follow-on mammography and/or things like needle biopsy. Okay? So at that point, they switch from screening to treatment, to diagnosis and treatment. Okay?
And in that case, you're saying that the hospitals are transitioning towards those 3D imaging anyway?
Your hospital, basically anywhere, it just depends on where they want to go. So what they would do is take that result, and typically what they'll be, in this case, because the trust has only mom, so what they would actually get is multiple films from the prior periods also, so they would see the progression in the tissue. They would take those in, and then whoever they go to would then decide what the next step in diagnosis and treatment is.
And I think, like you said, my guess is that if most, radiology companies like this are moving towards this, at some point in time, mom is going to have 3D technology anyway. They're going to have to
Right.
replace it, but that's...
They actually have the 3D technology now, so the question is, do you want to pay for it? So again, it's a judgment call. I think eventually we'll all wind up here, kind of like, so the question is when. And with Jamie recognizing the, when you look later, what you're going to see is we're projecting a $540,000 drawdown in reserves in the current year. So it's really up to you guys.
So I guess from the employee standpoint, staying with 2D is not necessarily a negative thing. 3D is just a more advanced examination, but sticking with 2D is not a negative thing.
I would suggest to you it's been an adequate technology for all.
Right. Okay.
What's the difference cost factor between 2D and 3D?
What's the bump?
$20, $30 on you guys?
Yeah.
Remember? Somewhere,
Oh, that's
the ballpark, $30 per test.
Well, then that wasn't something we were considering before when we were looking at all of these things, right?
Yeah, these were add-ons.
Yeah, I think that was an add-on.
So, Madam Chair, at this point, I would basically just say, if you guys have a direction, it would be which of these would you like to move forward with, and we'll get them done for July.
Here.
Oh, there you go.
Can I ask a question?
On the suggested $10 for the prescription at the clinic, is that for a 30-day prescription, or?
I don't know if theirs is written 28 or 30, but we'd have to find that out.
It would depend on basically any script. The copay would be whatever was applicable for it, whether it's 30, 90, so it would be any script applicable from there.
All right.
So is that the same copay that we're paying at CVS?
As of July, it will mirror whatever's happening in the regular plan.
Thank you.
I think the idea was that still having the medication available at the clinic was a convenience, and there's probably 5 providers in town that dispense from their offices, which just makes it easy. And it's probably, it's whatever, that drug company considers a 1 month. Some of them say 28, some of them say 30. It just depends.
This will fall basically under the same provisions as what's in effect on the RX card today. So it'll go to that. My guess, candidly, if you look at the labs, I mean, the Blue Cross contract is, when you talk 30% difference between what was there, this is probably a hidden cost driver in the plan, the way it's set up just on the cost of the drugs, because obviously it's working out that way on the labs. I would think it'd be the same way.
And I think the biggest savings of all of those obviously is changing out the labs and moving those out if we're going to see that much of a savings. And so my understanding is that LabCorp typically would take one of their employees, put them in that clinic certain times, and they'll draw the labs, and then they take everything back, and then they get all the results. So that's instead of a Cerner employee doing that. And if it's the LabCorp fees are 30% more, or 30% less even than what they're being
Than
charged.
the contract that Cerner has.
Right, so.
So again, that, if you go on the last couple of years, that's 40 grand in savings. Big number.
Every grand helps.
So will that be the case then, that a LabCorp representative would come in a couple times a week? Or, because I thought I heard you say that a Cerner employee would still draw, and then they would send it over to LabCorp to be tested.
Either way, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so I'm just saying from an employee standpoint, they wouldn't have to come back on Tuesday because the LabCorp people are only there on Tuesday.
That's our understanding.
Oh,
No, they would so the Cerner would draw it, and then just instead of running it through them, it would go to the LabCorp.
Okay, so if I came in on a Monday and they needed to run a lab, that would be fine?
Yes, that is my understanding. Like, this is being represented us as being non-disruptive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Motion? Any other questions?
I'll make a motion that we approve these changes on the first 4, but not the 5th one, not the 2D to 3D mammography, but the other one as presented.
I'll second it.
Any other questions? Anybody?
Sansamara?
Did you call me?
Yep.
Aye.
Hal Christensen?
Yes.
Marcia Cox?
Yes.
Mike, when we reach that point of doing these changes, how will we present this to the employees that we're doing the best we can, and we're not doing this for any other reason other than we just can't afford it right now? Is there going to be meetings or presentations once this is all put into place?
There will, and we're going to work with Aaron's group to hold an all-staff meeting at the PAC sometime this spring.
Okay.
And review kind of the current state of the EBT, address the changes in benefits, and then
Right.
also I'd like them to kind of paint a picture of the future moving forward. Just some of the barriers that we're trying to address. I think that needs to be known, that there's some unknowns out there, and here's what we're doing by way of his consulting firm and you as EBT trustees, and maybe painting a very short-term plan as to how we're going to try to address these current issues within the EBT. I think everyone needs to hear that.
Oh, I do too. And I just hope the employees, nobody likes to pay more or, lose more of their net pay. And it's just, I mean, it's always a tough pill to swallow, but I'd like to make it as understandable as possible too. I mean, I hate to say I look at charts like this, and I'm glad Marcia's here because a lot of the stuff it just glazes over me. So I want the employees to, if we can present it to them and explain it to them in very plain language instead of, not trying to baffle them with BS,
Correct.
just this is what it is. And I think that's very important. I know I appreciate it when it's happened to me in the past, so.
And we're, right now, internally in the district, we're trying to identify an early release date that will allow us to all meet in the pack, and then try to mirror that up with their schedule as well.
Okay. I mean, I'd be glad to attend too.
Yeah, me too.
Well, we're going to see if you would go ahead and just facilitate it. if that's
Oh,
what-
yeah. Yeah. I'll facilitate. So let me introduce Darren Collins.
Thanks.
Well, and I think it's a good idea. I mean, always we want to make sure that everybody understands, where all of these changes, or any changes for that matter, are coming from. But I think more importantly, especially this year, we've been more consistent at being able to draw some of these things out. And up until this point, up until, getting a new consultant, there were so many things that we were swimming in the dark, and we had no idea. And, now I guess I feel, change is always painful, especially if it has money involved, but the fact that, once we understand and recognize where the deficiencies were, what unknowns we had, like the prescription not having, being subject to the reinsurance, all of those things involved. I guess, as long as you have good information, accurate information, you can make a good decision. It might not be, the decision that everybody wants, but at the end of the day, we still want to make sure that the employees and all the members have an adequate, a good insurance plan that they can use. And, at this point, I'm looking at the numbers, just the differential, and when we started paying that additional premium for the dependents, it's north of $1.8 million, that was being charged, or that would have been charged to the district employees to cover the dependent, that shortfall that we had. So there have been changes made over the last couple of years, and we're just trying to stabilize it and get it back to where it needs to be.
And Madam Chair, point of clarification, Elena just pointed out that we're probably going to need a second vote on this one. That one made the changes, but just to make sure we're on the same page, because what we didn't do was actually adopt the overall rates. Now, with all of the changes that you have done at this meeting and the prior meeting, these are the resulting rates. And I want to clarify, these are not the rates that would be funded. Okay, so these are the rates that we would set the COBRA premiums off of. Okay, and these will officially be your rates, and this is how we will measure the anticipated drawdown in the cash resources of the trust.
And these are the rates that are reflected on your
Yep.
spreadsheet.
So, Elena, if you go back to the X sheet page, and let's just walk through the changes that have been approved. And what we'll use these two, we'll work with Mike and his crew to go over, and with employees, we'll walk through. These are the actual changes that have been approved by the trustees. Okay, so again, $20 copay for all visits to the clinic. Cover non-routine colonoscopies, 80% after deductible. So these are basically diagnostic, typically. Outpatient behavioral health changed to $55 copay and then 100%. Specialty copay 20% with a maximum of $300. Increase the deductible to $2,500, $5,000. Out-of-pocket max to $6,500, $13,000. Okay, generic copay $10, retail $25, mail. So that, again, going back to the question of how for the now, if they're going outside the clinic, right?
Right.
Okay. Oral specialty. This is one we just did. So this is for specialty meds. So it's a 2-week partial refill on the first one. lab services from the clinic to Blue Cross, $10 copays on generic drugs dispensed at the clinic, and eliminate OTC. And then on the silver plan, so we added a $40 copay for visits. These are all effective in July. Again, the colonoscopy benefit, and then changing the mental health, all these parallel the actives. Same thing with the diagnostic testing, 80%. This one's a correction. Then we've got all the other ones, the out-of-pocket max, deductible increases. Higher copay, generic $30 at retail. The specialty med refill benefit, lab services to Blue Cross, $10 at the clinic, and the elimination of the OTC. So these are all of the changes that you approved between this meeting and the prior ones.
And that would be effective July 1.
All of these are in July. Okay. And let me just see, this might be the place, Madam Chair, to go over that spreadsheet we gave to you. So,
Before you do that, can I ask, I just want to clarify this in my head, because on the changes for the lab draws and all of that, of the copays, none of the things on this page would be effective now. Everything is effective July 1.
July 1.
So when an employee goes to the clinic, there's not going to be any change to anything?
From today until June 3rd, there would not be a change.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Even with LabCorp practices, with just that internal that the employee would do?
We're assuming all of this would be in July 1. Okay. I didn't think about that. I didn't know if there was any discussion that we could do that one
We
earlier.
can start saving money now. on
Exactly,
something
yeah.
like that.
So I'll talk to Jamie about that.
Yeah, I think I'd like to.
If we could do that one, that would be. Okay. Okay. All right, so if you look at this spreadsheet, what this one's doing is, it's kind of involved, okay, but at the top, and then we're going to come back, Madam Chair, and eventually approve that. Those are the changes, these are the rates. Okay. So you look at, we've got the 2017-18 rates, so these are the current rates that would be in effect through July. Beneath them, we have what the rates should be in July if they are actuarially appropriate, which is basically they should theoretically be break-even rates. And then to the right of that, what we got is what the district has adopted with a 10% increase. Okay? And then what we did below that, we look at the cost share between the medical, between the district and employees. And we do the same thing for retirees. Okay? And then we do that same basic calculation for the silver plan. And then in that red area, dental and vision are down the bottom, those are pretty much non-entities. That red area shows, essentially there's a funding gap. This is the delta between what the gap is and what the actuarial rate should be. And it results at the end of the day in an anticipated drawdown in the cash position. I'll distinguish that from surplus in a second. In the cash position of the trust by about $541,000. Okay, so when we're talking with employees, we're going to do those meetings. What we'll walk in and do is we're going to show, here's how much cash the district has. There'll be an estimate of the incurred but not paid IDNP liability, which is the estimated dollar value of the claims that for services have actually been provided, but then cleared. That reduces the cash, and then we'll show this anticipated reduction.
Can I ask, as part of the compensation package that was just approved by the governing board, we do have a one-time $150,000 contribution to the EBT. Would that reduce that $500 and some thousand figure?
Yeah,
That's in addition.
Yeah,
that's
we
in
did not
addition to the
anticipate
10%.
that. So yeah, you're going to kick 150 in? Yeah, so that would cut that down by another 150K. Okay. So, but this one, the reason I think that one's important when you're painting the picture for everybody is to show that decline as we did with you guys, and it's in your packet, you show that decline in the cash position, pretty much sets the stage. I mean, it tells everybody it's not, everybody knows that, unless you're the federal government, you have printing presses, nobody can do that forever, right? So, and then what we'll show is what's left over.
So when an employee says, well, how did we get into a $500,000 hole? Is that a measure of premiums not being adjusted in years past, which would have mitigated that?
I don't think it's just that.
Well, just,
I would say probably a combination of a few of those things.
Well, you know that question's
I know
gonna-
for some time,
yeah,
rates never increase.
right.
Well, you
So-
can go back and look in the last 20 years, and there was a period of 7 years where there were recommended rate increases every single year, and no rate increases were done.
Right, and I understand that.
Right.
That's my comment back then was, that's why communication is so important, letting employees know. My understanding back then was there were no raises for 8 years, so the trust didn't raise the rates because of that, but it was never communicated on a yearly basis. All of a sudden, at the end of 8 years, they said, oh, by the way, we're going to bump your premium by $1,400 or something like that. So I know the question, I mean, because I'd ask that question, I'd say, well, how come we're in a $500,000 hole like this? And again, if there's, a couple of simple, straightforward answers, one of them is, well, because we haven't been charging the premiums that we should have been charging in the past, and we've gradually dug ourselves into this hole. I know, from what I understand, another reason was some of the extraordinary claims we've had that affected our cash, because in the way it was explained to me a while back was we had 2 100-year floods back to back. And
That contributed. Yeah.
they contribute, and Mike, and again, I'm a simple guy, I love math, but I like simple explanations, and you can give simple explanations to people, and I just think that would be more appropriate when it comes up, or even staying ahead of it, and in our presentation saying, okay, here's this, and we're in a $500,000 hole, and let us explain how we got to this place, before someone says, how did we get to this place? Yeah.
Right.
And I just think, again, it's proactive instead of reactive, and just getting in front of it. It is what it is, but let's explain it up front to the
And I think a
employees.
third part to what you were just describing is also that currently there's an evaluative process, if you will, of evaluating certain benefits that are in place and programs to determine whether or not they're cost effective. And I think that's also an all-important number 3, not just the lack of rate increases or the 200-year floods, but there's also many conversations, even as of late, where we're trying to figure out what's currently in place. Is that working? Is that actually contributing to the health and overall stability of the EBT, or is it actually working in the opposite direction? So, and that conversation will be ongoing for a little while this evaluation is taking place. And there's been many conversations just using the center as an example. Is that truly a benefit? It was communicated as it would be a benefit, and it would be a financial benefit. And it may be, but without people, as Aaron would say, walking around it, kicking the tires, and really trying to figure out if it's really truly effective, it may not be. It may be something that's seriously hurting the financial stability of the EBT. But in time, that will all be revealed.
Sure. Okay.
And I think, just to echo that too, I'm sorry.
As an employee, I would ask that same question: how did we get here, and what are we doing to ensure that it doesn't happen again?
Well, we changed consultants for one, so now we're getting a better picture. And I'm not trying to say that to disparage anyone. What I'm trying to say is that for at least 2 years that I know of, because I've been actively asking questions for 2 years, the district and the EBT and the members did not have a clear picture of what we were paying for, because we didn't have any way to gauge it, and we didn't have any way to really see. We know that every year for 5 years it's $1.2 million plus other costs for our clinic, but we had no way of seeing really what we were paying for, because there were so many parts and pieces all jumbled together. So now we're going to have a more clear picture, And so we can say, we're paying for, you know, a platinum version of whatever, or this kind of a vehicle. I mean, you know, we can have a value, you know, a value added kind of a thing where we know this is what we're getting, this is what we're paying for it, so do those match up? And up until this time, we did not have a clear picture of that at all. And we also found out through having a new consultant that we had certain exposures to the district that were unfunded or that were not covered. The prescription drugs were not part of our excess loss, which is a huge liability. And again, we didn't know because that wasn't ever shared. We didn't have any actuarial numbers because they weren't done. And even as many people that had been on this board in the past, that question, you know, and I think for me it was, we saw numbers, you know, on renewals that showed that they were actuarially sound based on the information from the consultant, and there was no actuary involved in getting to those numbers. So we really we're in a much better place, I think, now in trying to determine what what the whole picture is, and to make sure that we don't, you know, get in that place again.
And I think what just was discussed here in just the last 5 minutes would pretty much be your opening and your closing presentation. Far more than these.
Right.
They'll need to see numbers and understand that we're seeing pluses and minuses and gains and benefits and losses. But I believe the heart of that conversation needs to be what was just said here in the last 5 minutes. People, I think, would walk away saying, I believe that we're moving in the right direction.
Right.
They might not like the current
Right.
reality.
I might not be happy, but at least I'm aware of
Yes.
what's
Right.
As an
going on.
What
employee,
she just said as a trustee,
Right.
what you just said as a trustee, what you
Right.
just said as the consultant, I have faith that there are people now asking questions and demanding answers.
Right. And I think even talking about, you know, when the district took up the difference in the dependent premium, for next year, we're looking at over $1.8 million that the district is going to be paying for that, because we were put in a position several years ago that we had to cover that. You know, the employees hadn't gotten any raises, those premiums went crazy high, something had to be done, and it was done, but that's $1.8 million that, you know, that has to get covered. So, yeah, I think, you know, we're not always going to get answers that we like, but at least we're going to have answers.
At least we'll have answers.
Yeah, and we'll be able to deal with, you know, the situation at hand, you know.
So, Madam Chair, can I just have one more time, just pop them up, and if we get a vote to approve the premiums as shown, with the understanding that these are the adopted premiums, they're going to be funded differently by the district. Then I think we've got all components that we need. So the motion would be to adopt the 2018-2019 premiums as reflected on the spreadsheet.
And these premiums reflect this $541,000 shortfall.
That's correct. They assume a $541,000 shortfall.
Assume that, yeah.
Yep.
Minus the 150 one-time.
So, yeah, minus-
The other contribution.
So you're saying then, for example, what's highlighted there, the 23.87, when we contribute 10%, next year will be not just the 10% ongoing, but we'll have basically a 14% shortfall.
Plus medical cost inflation.
Right.
14% plus, yeah, that's correct.
So then employee plus family, we're going to be roughly around 6% plus inflation. Okay.
If that, and that's a really good question, Mike. That assumes no changes. Now, we know, to go back to the strategic plan we did with the board, okay, we don't know the answers we're going to come up with, but the current structure is built around that clinic. Okay, so everything is built around that clinic, which includes, for example, that we're not able to offer a high deductible health plan that would offer access to the clinic because we're prohibited from, under federal law, from having a lot of things, giving things out free, if you will. Okay?
Right.
So in the strategic plan, it calls for us to model this fall, to model what would the world look like post-clinic. If we went to a more traditional structure that was not built around the clinic, what would that do to the cost structure? So then all these numbers change. Your question was excellent. I mean, but see, if in that world, that would assume no changes to the clinic structure. Okay, that makes sense?
And do you if we did change the clinic structure, do you believe that will help those numbers even further or add to the unfunded part of it?
Well, okay, speaking in broad strokes, I think the clinic, based just on the premiums, I think the clinic's an expense. Okay, so I think that if you moved into a structure, I'm guessing, my expectation would be that if we model it out, that we could, if all things were being equal today, I think we could drop those premiums by about 12 to 15% outside the clinic model, just by reducing the
That's
structure.
significant.
That's my guess. That's
Yeah, sure,
that's
it's a
back of
guess.
the
It's just
envelope,
a, you know,
but that's
in the
what I would
cloud guess.
expect, yeah.
No.
So basically, that would be that we would fund the cost of inflation just about that.
Yeah, some probably. Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we adopt as presented on the board there for 2018, 2019.
I'll second it.
Call for the vote. Any questions? Call for the vote.
Sam Scarmato,
Yes.
Al Christensen,
Yes.
Marsha Cox,
Yes.
Carrie Thompson.
I'll just abstain because I'm not sure what just happened.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's good.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
We just voted a salary raise.
There you go.
Yeah.
From 0 to
20
0.
times 0 is, new math. Carry the home math. Yeah.
I'll catch up.
Okay. Next item, Madam Chair, or Madam Chair. The next one is correcting, this is a silver plan enrollment error. This is basically just an administrative error that we had 7 retirees who signed up for the silver but wound up on the gold. Since the plan started, as of the time of this, there were 17 claims have been processed for 5 of those members. What we would like to do is move them back over onto the silver plan and then reprocess the bills. Results in Gilsbar will seek reimbursement of $197.71 from providers, and then the members who are impacted by this would then have to pay an additional $1,699.97. So it's not a harm in the sense that this is what they should have been paying anyways, but I don't expect anybody to come to be thrilled, but it's what the cost they had signed up to bear, just that the claims were processed incorrectly based on that being a little
So the
bit.
employees signed up for the silver plan, it was just that when it was entered into the Gilsbar system, it was
Gold, I guess.
enrolled as gold.
Correct.
And because of that, the administrative error, the employees will have to pay that back, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they will have to, both the vendors and them, because in other words, this is money they would have paid anyways, right? But it was processed under the gold benefits instead of the silver benefits, so their expectation was silver benefits, this corrects it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but, I can see on the employee side where they don't pay attention, they just, my bill is what it is. And that kind of being a,
Well, I mean, and to that effect, if they were getting the gold benefits, they didn't pay the gold premiums either. So it's just a correction.
Yeah, will Gilsbar go back and reprint all their EOBs?
They'll reprocess
Send?
claims.
Yeah, they'll reprocess all of them.
But that will get sent to the employees?
Both to
new
the both to
EOBs?
providers and to employees.
and you said there's just 5 of them?
17.
17
17 claims for 5
claims.
members.
If that's a-
And again, they're not being penalized.
It's just a
I
correction.
understand when someone says, oh, by the way, you got to pay me more money. It's like, well, you would have paid this anyway. It was just, this is why. Yeah.
So if you agree with that recommendation, Madam Chair, we just need a motion to proceed as outlined in the memo.
Have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'm always a bad guy.
Second.
Sam Scarmato, Al Christensen,
Yes. They can't hear that.
She was looking at me.
Marsha Cox,
Yes.
Carrie Thompson.
Yes.
When I don't answer my phone, it's much louder.
Life insurance amendments?
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the trust, this is the basically corrections to the policy that was placed when the district's life moved from Unum to Guardian. It's outlined in the memo, but just for purpose of record, I'll walk through them real quick. The recommendations are, one, in the policy that was replaced, the voluntary term life, which is just natural causes essentially, and the AD&D were not tied together, so the employee would elect voluntary term. They would separately elect voluntary AD&D. When it was set up here, they were tied together, so it was one election. So our recommendation on this one is to basically put it back to where it was, which was the original intent, was to kind of lay out, make it one, essentially replacing the other. The second one is AD&D was only on the employee. This was an error on Unum's part, but which was basically they didn't have an option to have an AD&D for the family. So this is recommending, since one of their employees just checked the wrong box, let the employees of the district elect that voluntary family AD&D.
Point of clarification, it was Guardian's error, not Unum's.
Apologies, Guardian. On the spouse voluntary term life rates, the policy was calculated on the spouse rates before, set up now to calculate on the employee age. So this reverses it back to what it should have been. Okay. The next one, number 4, is that the Unum policy had a minimum value of $25,000 that was not set up in the Guardian policy. So this would reinstate that $25,000 minimum. There are 12 employees who will be impacted. They'll need to increase to get to that $25,000 minimum. So there will be some cost for them to do so. Number 5, basically the Guardian staff confirmed again that the district's rehire provision is the first of the month following 6 months. Their normal is 30, so to align 30 days, first of the month following 30 days, let's get it back to the 6 months. Okay. We, ECA, recommended that the contract align back to from July 1 to June 30 instead of the September dates. Let's get basically when all your contracts align. And we're running into that with the clinic stuff where you got the clinic and the lease that are off year, and so many other ones are all over the place. So this is just getting it corrected to align with that policy, or excuse me, fiscal year. And this other one's kind of an odd one, but the way the policy was set up, when you have dual spouse, the employee and the spouse are both working for the district, it allows, they're both covered as employees, and they can then cover each other and their kids duplicates. You wind up with all this coverage with each of them doing duplicate coverage, and we're recommending that only one. So we recommend getting rid of that dual coverage option. So it's basically one of them can cover, they can either cover as an employee or a spouse, and only one can cover the kids.
Not both.
Right.
So
Would that result in them getting a double payment?
that's my question.
Yeah, they would be paying for it twice.
No,
I'm sorry, the district is
in the
paying
event
for
of
it
a claim.
twice.
The district is paying for it twice, yeah.
Okay.
These changes
These-
for ratification. As a point of clarification, Carrie, we already worked with the chairperson to approve these changes, so this is just a ratification. Makes sense.
Yep. So you're doing a retro over the shoulder.
And then, my one question with the dual coverage, like, is that the spouse too, or just the children?
I didn't hear you, Gary.
For like the dual coverage, because we used to each be covered and it's what, 1.5 times our salary, is that what it would be for covered as a spouse?
No, so in other words, if you're both employees, you both get the employee coverage.
Just one of us?
One of you gets, you both get the employee coverage, only one of you can cover the dependent kids in that case.
You can't
That's what
cover
I
each
thought.
other
I
as a
was
spouse.
making
Yeah, no, I
sure
get
that
it,
was-
yeah. So the motion in this case would be to
ratify.
approve the changes as previously authorized by the chair.
So moved.
Second.
Sam Spalmata,
Yes.
Al Christensen,
Yes.
Marcia Cox,
Yes.
Carrie Thompson.
Yes. And any changes that employees want to be able to make, will that be done during open enrollment?
For these will all just be
Life insurance.
implemented now, actually.
Yeah, retro
But
back to
like
September.
putting, like, because there was like a time limit date to put your kids on or to sign your kids up. So will that now happen during open enrollment?
Not sure which one that is.
Carrie, are you talking
I
about
believe so.
for the basic district life?
Yes.
That's all still going. I'm still trying to get some people that may have had a spouse or a
Okay, so
dependent.
they can still do that. They were under the assumption there was a deadline on that.
Well,
so-
I tried to,
Okay.
you know,
okay.
because I was trying to help.
I never
her.
know if it's like a policy
Yeah.
deadline or our own deadline, so that's.
Yeah,
fine.
it's kind of both, and they're trying to close this all up with me. And I said, if I can't get these people to get me the information, I don't know what else to do. Because it is, benefit, and why wouldn't someone want to sign up, being the district's paying for that $5,000 spouse and $2,500 child? I'm just not sure if they understand, but they're trying to close that part up,
Okay.
so.
Did you get the vote, Naomi? Did you get the vote?
Yes.
All right. And Madam Chair, this last one is just a series of information. I just Hal had asked that we circle back from the minutes to make sure that we've covered all of the items that were said, hey, we're going to do follow-up the next meeting, so this memo is intended to address that. So we got the health and wellness clinic report on the full plate sessions, and then for the previous meetings, a real important one for us is we sent everybody out, including staff and trustees, the renewal meeting surveys. We'd really like to get that back from you guys, just to get any feedback so we can make it relevant to you. I think we've only got one back.
I've only received one. You did not send it.
I thought I sent mine.
No,
No?
no, I only received one, and
Getting
it was
called
none
out
of you.
for the public.
Would you like me to resend
Would you
it?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Because otherwise.
And we'd really like your candid feedback. It helps
400
us to
emails.
we want to make sure that what we're doing is relevant to you guys, and that particularly if we're missing anything, to make sure that we get you what you want in there. Recognizing everybody wants the meetings to be shorter, we want to make sure we're doing it right. Okay. The bank balance graph was requested, so we attached that in the packet. We've got the trend visit report in here, which for the period January 13 through January 1, 2013 through 2017. We also had Mike Bonnie's restated financial reports with that $144,000 that was from way back. Right? The method AHG uses to calculate their ROI, the paperwork is in there. And then we've got the directory for United Healthcare Vision, which is pretty, actually this one's pretty straightforward. And on this one, you can see from Jamie's last note, basically what United Healthcare is saying is they contacted the one firm that in particular everybody seems to want, and they just said they're not going to join.
Right.
They're not interested in joining.
You know, stop talk.
So there's no action required on that item.
I do have a question about because I know we talked about it when, must have been the last meeting when Mike was giving us information, and I know that we had that unreconciled balance at 144 because, the accounts hadn't been balanced or reconciled prior to that, so we started off with that number and then had to go, I guess, to a zero balance. Are we ever going to figure out what that $144,000 was for?
Mike, didn't you say it's down to like 34,000?
No, it was 144,000.
I know it was, but I thought it had been, no?
No, not
Okay.
that. It's just gonna, how much time and effort will you want Mike Bonnie to really go back and look, and there's just, because there's been a lack of having proper reconciliations in the past, it's gonna be really difficult, I think, to wrap our hands around what it truly is that made that $144,000 difference. I can talk to him again and see if there's any progress that he's able to make, any help that we can give him as well. We've worked with our auditors on that. I don't know, I just don't have a clear answer for you at this particular time, but ultimately it'd be nice to find it. I just don't know if it's going to be possible. I'll have to talk to him.
Weren't they saying that they didn't think that anybody made off with $144,000? It was that there could have been double entries
Right.
on some different things, or there's things, I thought there was like with the county, with the city. I'm just recalling certain things, but it wasn't like, again, there's someone's $144,000 richer because of some nefarious action in here. It was more it hadn't been reconciled, and it could have been attributable to double entries or similar accounting functions like that.
I seem to recall Mike saying that it would had something to do with a check or an invoice that hadn't been paid or cashed yet.
No, that was a different one. They
Was it a
actually
different one?
added it back in because,
Yeah, it was an uncashed.
And I guess my only point again is that, you know, we're the stewards of these dollars. And I know that this was a couple of years ago, but and I would never have that kind of, I mean, if I came to my husband and said, I have a $144,000 discrepancy, he'd ask me, you know, what I was selling, because we wouldn't have that. But, you know, even anything like that, especially because it's money that is supposed to be getting spent for the right reasons. I guess if there is a way, obviously, you know, we're not going to spend 300 hours doing it, because that would cost us more than it would to figure it out. But, you know, I just, it bothers me that we don't know where $140,000 went. And I don't know if that was just in 1 year, or if it was, I mean, we're still trying to figure out what some of these things are costing. And so I guess I'd like to see if there's a way. I think it would be prudent to find that out. But maybe you can go back and.
I already know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it in case the board and maybe Aaron think it might be a good idea to have it made part of the public record so that it's in the minutes. So here's my question. Did CERNA provide its promised report on February the 28th as CERNA said it would?
Short answer, yes.
I didn't know the answer.
What Cerner's done is this is the information that Marcia had requested.
The data
to run a comparison on what the average cost of a clinic visit is from the Cerner clinic versus what's available in the Blue Cross network. They sent us 3 files secured. We have forwarded those on to Mike Shunning, the actuary. I know they gave us the files. I don't know yet if it is adequate.
Okay.
But they did meet the deadline to give us the data they promised by February 28th. So now we're in that initial stage of where is it, how's the data compare, and then we'll draw from there.
I'm glad I asked.
So yeah, thank you. That's actually a good one. So yeah, we were glad to get that. So.
Okay.
Any other questions from the update? Future agenda items we need to see?
I guess I'm, and I know that you guys all got the same copies of all these invoices that I have, and I know that I've talked to Carrie about it and Aaron different times, but I'm still troubled by the lab charges that we got from Cerner that were pass-through charges, and I think it was somewhere around $18,000 just for LabCorp for their October labs, only because it was 10 times or 100 times more than what a traditional lab should be. Again, the $800 vitamin D. I'd really like to ask that those charges be disputed and audited, and see if there's a way for us to get that amount changed. Based on what I saw before and after on the charges, I think that it was an error that we just simply paid, and I just don't think that we can afford to do that. And so I guess I'm not sure how we would do that, but I think that the charge has to be disputed from Cerner, I think, because they were the ones that were billed for the charges, and then ask LabCorp to reconcile it. And LabCorp and other labs, they do that all the time. But there was nothing to show why those amounts were that high, and there were 30 or 40 charges of $800, I think, and there were other labs that they did that were significantly higher. But I would like to see if we could ask that be disputed and have it audited and ask it to be reconciled.
You don't have a problem doing that. And Marshall will just get with you and clarify that. Go through it. We do it.
Yeah, we can go through that.
My only question was future meeting dates. So do we have a plan for how often and when?
It was our understanding that there's a meeting date already set for April, so we were just going to go with it.
Okay.
It was April, and we got, I think Jamie got these off of the website, and it's April 25th.
Right. Yeah, April 25th is what I have.
That's the only one I have.
And I'll work with Naomi to, and that's the meeting, we'll typically have the vendors do a shorter presentation, and then it should only, the meetings that we typically run like this should only be like 1 to 2.
Or if the vendors can provide us information ahead of time.
Yeah, yeah. Yep. I'll make sure to get a packet out to you a week before,
Perfect,
with the agenda, with all the materials all at once.
perfect. Thank you. Rather than reading 20 PowerPoints. page
Yeah, and we
by
won't
page by
project it,
page.
it'll simply be a discussion.
Information, sure.
Did you have a question?
I just wanted to share, I know I sent out an email that we will be doing an open meeting law training on the 23rd of April. I think your meeting is the 25th.
Right.
That will be an early evening. It's open to any public board member, EBT, city, any. We're doing it in conjunction with TOPOC, and Ledbetter Law Firm will be conducting it here.
Here?
I'll get that information out.
Nice. So we don't have to drive to Topop?
Pardon?
We don't have to drive to Topop?
No, no.
I was just
They
there
preferred to
yesterday.
come here.
Well, that's okay.
Actually, I was in
I'm not
Mojave
certain that Dr. Atassi gets my emails though, so I'm not sure if he's aware of it or not, but.
He does, but we might have to see if we can do a text version.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned, 4:05.
Hour and 2 minutes, pretty good.